Cowboy promised he'd marry the Apache girl who saved him. Years later, she returned for him. Jack Thompson rode across the wide, open plains under the harsh afternoon sun, the wind carrying dust that clung to his weathered coat. He had been traveling for days, following a trail that seemed endless, stretching from one ridge of the western frontier to another. The land was vast, empty, and unforgiving. Jack had always loved the freedom of the open plains, the feeling that the world belonged to him and the horizon was his only limit. But on this particular journey, the sense of freedom was mixed with unease. Strange sounds had followed him for the past few miles, whispers of movement in the brush, the distant clatter of hooves that didn't belong to him. Jack was a young cowboy, brave and skilled with both horse and gun. He had grown up learning the ways of the land, understanding the rhythms of the plains, the signs of storms, and the movements of animals. But experience could not always protect him from danger. He had heard stories from fellow cowboys of bandits and outlaws who preyed on travelers, taking what they wanted and leaving nothing behind. As he rode, Jack kept his hand close to the hilt of his revolver, eyes scanning the horizon, ears alert to every sound. The sun was low now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and Jack decided it was time to rest. He guided his horse toward a small hollow near a cluster of rocky hills, hoping to find some shelter. As he dismounted, he noticed something unusual, a trail of footprints that did not belong to any animal he knew. They were fresh, heading in the same direction he had been traveling. Jack's heart quickened. He crouched behind a rock, careful not to make a sound, and peered through the shadows. Suddenly, figures appeared on the ridge above him. Men, rough-looking and armed, moved with purpose, scanning the area. Jack realized too late that he had stumbled into an ambush. The outlaws spotted him almost immediately. He drew his gun, but one of them fired first. A bullet tore through the air, grazing his shoulder. Jack cried out in pain and fell from his horse, struggling to get up. The outlaws laughed, their voices cruel and mocking. Jack knew he could not fight them all. His strength was fading, and the world around him began to blur. Just as the outlaws moved closer, ready to claim victory, a sudden commotion came from the side. Arrows flew through the air with incredible accuracy. One of the outlaws screamed as an arrow struck his shoulder. Another fell with a cry. In the confusion, Jack looked up to see a young girl moving with extraordinary speed and skill. She was small but fierce, her movements precise, and her eyes were sharp and determined. Her name was Ayanna. She belonged to the Apache tribe that lived in the region, people who had long understood the ways of the land and the dangers that came with it. Ayanna had been tracking the same outlaws for days, knowing they had caused harm to travelers before. When she saw Jack, she acted without hesitation, drawing her bow and striking with unmatched skill. Within moments, the outlaws fled, cursing and bleeding, leaving Jack alone with the girl who had saved his life. Jack could hardly believe what had happened. He tried to stand, but pain shot through his shoulder and he collapsed again. Ayanna approached him cautiously, her dark hair tied back, her eyes filled with concern. She knelt beside him, examining the wound. Her hands were gentle but confident, and her voice when she spoke was calm and soothing. "You are hurt. You must rest," she said, her tone carrying authority without harshness. Jack nodded, unable to speak at first. The pain was intense, but the relief he felt was stronger. He had never expected anyone, especially someone so young, to come to his rescue. Ayanna helped him to a safer spot behind the rocks, using strips of cloth she carried to bandage his wound. She moved with care, speaking softly, ensuring he was as comfortable as possible. As she worked, Jack watched her with admiration. There was courage in her every gesture, a quiet strength that he could sense deeply. Over the next few hours, Jack began to recover, but he knew he could not move on his own. Ayanna insisted on guiding him to a safer place, away from the outlaws who might return. She led him through hidden paths, over hills, and through thick brush, moving quickly despite the weight of responsibility. Jack followed as best he could, grateful for her guidance and presence. They shared few words, but in the silence, a bond began to form. Jack felt a mixture of awe, respect, and something more he did not yet understand. As evening fell, they reached a small clearing near a stream. Ayanna set up a simple camp, gathering firewood and using herbs to clean and protect Jack's wound. She moved with a sense of purpose and knowledge that impressed him. For someone so young, she carried herself with the confidence and skill of someone much older. Jack, though injured, could not help but speak. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice weak but sincere. Iana looked at him with a small, understanding smile. You are alive, that is enough, she replied. Her words were simple, yet they carried a depth that Jack could feel in his heart. As night settled over the plains, they sat by the fire, the stars twinkling above, and Jack realized how alone he had felt before this moment. Now, with Ayana's presence, the harshness of the frontier seemed less intimidating. Over the next few days, Ayana tended to Jack, helping him regain strength. They shared stories of their lives. Jack spoke of his travels, the work he had done, and the loneliness he sometimes felt. Yana spoke of her tribe, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the ways of the land that she knew so well. They laughed at small jokes, shared meals, and watched the sun rise and set over the endless plains. In this time of healing, a connection formed that neither of them expected but both cherished. Jack was struck by Iana's courage. She had risked her own safety to save him, and yet she did so without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. He admired her strength, her skill, and the quiet determination that guided her every action. He began to realize that this young Apache girl had changed something within him. She had reminded him that kindness and bravery could exist in the most dangerous and unforgiving places. Before they parted ways, Jack knew he could not leave without making a promise. Though he did not fully understand the depth of his feelings yet, he felt certain that Iana had touched his heart in a way no one else ever had. "Iana," he said, his voice steady despite the lingering pain in his shoulder, "I promise I will return one day. I will come back for you, and when I do, I will marry you." Iana looked at him, her eyes wide but calm. There was a moment of silence, the air thick with meaning. She nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the promise, but without words, letting the weight of the vow settle between them. Jack felt a surge of hope and determination. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that this promise, made under the open sky and amidst the wild plains, was something he could not forget. As Jack rode away, supported by the strength he had regained, he glanced back one last time. Iana stood there, small but strong, watching him go. The plains stretched endlessly before him, but now they seemed less lonely. In his heart he carried the memory of her courage, the warmth of her kindness, and the promise he had made, a promise that would shape the years to come. Even as the miles stretched between them, Jack thought of Ayana often. He remembered the look in her eyes, the way she moved, the way she had saved his life without a second thought. Every sunset reminded him of her presence, and every quiet night made him long for the day they would meet again. The world was wide, and the frontier was full of dangers, but Jack's heart was fixed on one truth. The girl who had saved him would always have a place there, and he would find his way back to her no matter what. After Jack rode away from the clearing where Ayana had saved him, the vast plains seemed emptier than ever. Each mile he traveled, the memory of her courage and her eyes weighed heavily on his heart. Jack tried to focus on the work ahead, the trails he had to follow, and the dangers that came with the life of a cowboy. But no matter how far he rode, no matter how many towns he passed through, the image of Ayana stayed with him, like a quiet flame that refused to be extinguished. Jack returned to the settlements where other cowboys lived and worked. He shared stories of his adventures, of cattle drives, and of close encounters with danger, but he never spoke of Ayana. Her bravery had been extraordinary, and he knew many would not understand. Some might even laugh at the idea of a cowboy promising to marry an Apache girl he barely knew. Yet, in his heart, the promise he had made to her was sacred. It was not a passing thought or a fleeting admiration. It was a vow, a light in the darkness of a lonely and unpredictable life. Years passed. Jack continued his work as a cowboy, riding from town to town, herding cattle and facing the hardships of frontier life. He experienced cold winters that cut through his coat, scorching summers that left his skin burnt and cracked, and storms that turned gentle plains into rivers of mud. He fought off bandits, healed from injuries, and learned to survive by instinct and skill. Life was hard, often unfair, and filled with moments that tested both courage and patience. Throughout all of it, Jack never forgot Ayana. He would sometimes pause by a stream or under the shade of a lone tree, imagining her there with him. He remembered the way she had moved, the strength in her hands, the way she had looked at him with trust and determination. He remembered the quiet fire in her eyes, a fire that had saved his life. Her presence lingered in his memory like a song he could never forget. But as time went on, Jack began to realize the difficulties of keeping his promise. The world was vast, and Ayanna had disappeared into the land from which he could not easily reach her. He had no way of knowing if she was safe, if she would even remember him, or if the world had taken her in a direction far from his own path. The uncertainty was painful. It was easy to be strong in the open plains when danger was immediate and tangible, but this longing and uncertainty was a quiet ache that never left him. Jack tried to fill the emptiness with work. He rode across rivers, guided herds through harsh terrain, and took on the dangerous tasks other cowboys avoided. He fought storms and chased runaway cattle, but none of it could replace the hope of seeing Ayanna again. He wrote letters to towns he had passed, leaving notes with traders, friends, and strangers in the hopes that news of her might reach him. Most of the letters were never answered. The frontier was unpredictable and connections were fragile, yet he never stopped trying. Even among his fellow cowboys, Jack kept her memory alive in quiet ways. When others joked about women or spoke lightly of love, he would smile but say nothing. To them, love was something simple, fleeting, or even dangerous on the frontier. But Jack's love, or what he knew in his heart to be true care and respect, was different. It was patient, enduring, and rooted in something far beyond the ordinary. He carried it like a shield, protecting the memory of the girl who had saved his life and captured his heart. Meanwhile, Ayanna lived with her tribe. She grew older, her skills and strength developing even more. She became respected among her people for her courage, wisdom, and ability to navigate both the land and its dangers. She often thought of the young cowboy she had saved, wondering if he had survived, if he remembered her, or if life had moved him on. She remembered his words, the promise he had made under the setting sun, and a small part of her always hoped that someday, somehow, he would return. Ayanna's life was filled with responsibilities and challenges. She learned the ways of her people, hunted, cared for the young and the elderly, and protected her community when danger approached. Yet even amidst these daily duties, the memory of Jack lingered. She remembered the fear in his eyes when he had been injured, the gratitude in his voice, and the quiet strength that had been beneath his rugged exterior. That memory became a part of her, a quiet whisper of hope that life would one day bring them together again. Years continued to pass. Jack experienced both joy and sorrow. He made friends, faced betrayals, and occasionally found moments of happiness in small victories and celebrations in frontier towns. Yet every time he saw the sky stretch wide and empty over the plains, he felt the weight of the promise he had made. Ayanna was a presence in his heart, a guide he could not see but could feel. The memory of her bravery and her kindness gave him strength when life threatened to overwhelm him. Jack often thought about the life they might have shared. He imagined quiet evenings around a fire, conversations under the stars, and shared laughter after long days of work. He pictured her teaching him skills he had never learned, guiding him through parts of the land he did not know, and sharing the wisdom of her people. These visions kept him going, filling the emptiness that life on the frontier often brought. But the world was not kind, and Jack faced moments of despair. There were times when illness struck, when outlaws attacked, and when isolation became unbearable. He wondered if he would ever see Ayanna again, if she had survived the dangers of the land, or if the passage of time had taken her away from him forever. Yet even in these moments, he held on to hope. The promise he had made was not just words. It was a commitment that shaped every choice he made, every mile he rode, and every action he took. Jack also began to understand the importance of patience. He realized that life was unpredictable, that the future could not be forced, and that some things were beyond his control. Yet the memory of Ayanna and the promise he had made remained constant, a light that guided him through the dark and uncertain days. It was a quiet reminder that some bonds once formed could never be broken by distance, time, or circumstance. As the years stretched on, Jack learned to carry his longing with grace. He became a man of quiet strength, admired among other cowboys not just for his skill, but for his integrity and determination. He spoke rarely of his heart, but those who knew him could see the depth of his feeling in his eyes, in the careful way he treated others, and in the unwavering sense of purpose that guided his life. He never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that the girl who had saved him would one day return, and that the promise he had made would one day be fulfilled. And so life continued, harsh yet beautiful, full of trials yet also full of small victories. Jack Thompson remained a cowboy, wandering the plains, living a life shaped by his experiences and his memory of a brave Apache girl named Ayanna. Though years had passed, and though their paths had diverged, the connection they had formed during those few days in the wilderness never faded. In his heart he carried her presence, and it shaped the man he had become, a man ready for the day their lives would intersect once more. Jack knew that the frontier was vast and that challenges still awaited him. But he also knew that no distance, no danger, and no passing of time could diminish the bond he felt with Ayanna. That bond was stronger than fear, stronger than hardship, and stronger than the uncertainty of life itself. It was a bond of gratitude, respect, and a love that had begun with courage and had been nurtured by hope. Even as the seasons changed and the years rolled on, Jack remained vigilant in his promise. Every trail he rode, every town he visited, and every night spent under the stars reminded him of her. He often whispered her name into the wind, imagining that somehow she might hear it, might feel it, and might know that he had not forgotten. The memory of Ayanna became a part of him, a guiding force that gave meaning to the long and difficult years of separation. And somewhere, far across the plains and mountains, Ayanna thought of Jack as well. She remembered the young cowboy, brave and kind, who had trusted her, who had been saved by her courage, and who had made a promise that transcended time. Though she faced her own challenges and her own responsibilities, a quiet hope lived in her heart. A hope that one day the man she had saved would return, that their paths would cross again, and that the bond formed in the wilderness would finally find its fulfillment. Years had passed, and the world had changed around Jack Thompson. He had grown older, wiser, and more experienced. The wild plains that had once seemed so full of adventure now felt familiar and comforting, but they also reminded him of the emptiness he carried. Jack had survived storms, outlaws, and the long, harsh winters of the frontier, yet through all these years, the memory of Ayanna never left him. Every sunrise brought thoughts of her courage, her gentle voice, and the promise he had made so long ago. Jack had settled in a small town near the edge of the plains, a place where he could rest, trade goods, and find temporary comfort. He worked with other cowboys, helping herd cattle and guiding travelers, but none of the tasks or responsibilities could fill the void in his heart. Life continued around him, full of ordinary conversations, small victories, and simple joys, but every time Jack looked at the horizon, he wondered where Ayanna was and if she had survived the years that had passed. Meanwhile, Ayanna had not forgotten Jack either. Though life had been demanding, filled with her responsibilities to her tribe, she often thought of the cowboy she had saved. She remembered his eyes, his bravery, and the trust he had shown her during those few days in the wilderness. That memory had given her hope and strength, guiding her decisions, teaching her patience, and reminding her of a bond that no time or distance could break. Ayanna had grown into a strong and respected woman, known among her people for her courage, her wisdom, and her dedication. She had learned much about survival, leadership, and the ways of the land. Her skills had sharpened with time, and her heart had remained loyal to a promise that had been made so many years before. The thought of returning to Jack had been in the back of her mind for years, but the journey was not easy. The plains were dangerous, and she had to plan carefully, traveling with caution and courage. One day, as Jack rode along a familiar trail, he noticed something unusual on the horizon. A figure moved with confidence, striding toward him across the open plains. At first, he thought it might be another traveler, perhaps a trader or a cowboy from a distant town. But as the figure drew closer, Jack felt a strange sense of recognition, a pull in his heart that he could not ignore. The figure was moving with purpose, every step confident and steady. As the distance closed, Jack could see her clearly. It was Ayanna. She had returned just as he had hoped, her eyes filled with determination and warmth. Jack felt his heart leap in his chest. He stopped his horse, unable to speak at first, watching her approach. Time seemed to slow, the wind carrying her presence across the plains like a familiar song. The girl who had saved his life years ago had returned, and now she stood before him, grown into a woman of strength and courage, yet still carrying the spirit that had first drawn him to her. Ayanna stopped a few feet away, her gaze steady and filled with emotion. Jack dismounted slowly, unsure if this moment was real or a dream. The years of separation, the longing, and the hope all converged into a single heartbeat. He took a step toward her, then another, and finally spoke, his voice breaking slightly. "Yana, is it really you?" Yana nodded, a small, understanding smile touching her lips. "It is me, Jack," she replied softly, her voice carrying the same calm strength he had remembered. "I promised myself I would return, and I kept that promise." Jack felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, disbelief, and overwhelming gratitude. He took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her presence and the reality of the moment. For years, he had carried the hope that this day would come, and now it had. The girl who had saved him had returned, fulfilling the promise of a reunion that had survived distance, danger, and time itself. They walked together along the trail, sharing stories of the years that had passed. Jack spoke of the dangers he had faced, the nights spent under the stars, and the longing that never left his heart. He told Ayana about the people he had met, the towns he had visited, and the lessons he had learned about patience, courage, and hope. Yana listened intently, her eyes reflecting both pride and understanding. She shared her own experiences, the challenges she had faced, the responsibilities she had carried, and the journey that had finally brought her back to him. As they spoke, Jack realized how much they had both changed. The years apart had shaped them, tested their resolve, and strengthened their spirits. Yet despite the distance and time, the bond they had formed remained unbroken. It was a bond built on trust, bravery, and a promise that had been made in the wilderness so many years ago. Now, standing together, they could see that bond clearly, strong, and enduring. Jack and Ayana spent days together, exploring the plains as they had once done, but now with the knowledge and experience they had gained over the years. They laughed, shared meals, and watched the sun rise and set in silence, appreciating the simple joy of being together. Every moment was precious, every glance and touch a reminder of the journey that had brought them to this reunion. As time passed, Jack realized how much Ayana had influenced his life. Her bravery had taught him to face danger without fear, her kindness had shown him the power of compassion, and her loyalty had reminded him of the strength of promises. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that he would never forget the courage that had saved his life and the spirit that had kept him hopeful through years of separation. Yana, too, felt the weight of their shared history. She had seen the hardships Jack had faced, understood the patience he had shown, and recognized the depth of his feelings. In his eyes, she saw the same admiration and respect that had first drawn him to her. She realized that the bond they shared was not just a fleeting connection. It was a relationship built on mutual trust, understanding, and a love that had endured the tests of time. One evening, as they sat by a campfire under a sky full of stars, Jack spoke of the promise he had made so many years ago. "Ayana," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I promised I would come back, and now I am here. I want to honor that promise. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Yana looked at him, her eyes reflecting both emotion and certainty. "Jack, I never stopped believing in that promise," she said softly. "I knew one day we would meet again, and I am here because I chose to come back. We have both grown, we have both changed, but our bond remains. I am ready to be with you." In that moment, the years of longing, uncertainty, and hope came to a beautiful conclusion. The cowboy and the Apache girl who had saved each other's lives now stood together, ready to face the future as partners, bound by a promise that had survived every challenge. The plains around them, once vast and empty, now felt alive with the possibilities of a shared life, a life shaped by courage, love, and unwavering commitment. Jack and Ayana spent the following days planning their future. They spoke of building a home together, of combining their worlds, and of honoring both the traditions of the plains and the wisdom of Ayana's people. Every decision was made with care and respect, reflecting the deep understanding and admiration they held for one another. The challenges they had faced separately had prepared them to face the world together, stronger and more united than ever. Their reunion also inspired those around them. Friends and neighbors marveled at the story of the cowboy and the Apache girl, amazed at the courage, loyalty, and love that had endured across years of separation. Jack and Ayana became an example of hope, showing that true bonds could withstand distance, danger, and the passage of time. Their story spread quietly among the settlements, a tale of bravery, faith, and the power of promises kept. As they rode together across the plains, Jack and Ayanna felt a sense of peace they had never known before. The journey of separation had tested them, shaped them, and prepared them for this moment. Now, side by side, they could face the future with confidence, knowing that the bond they shared was unbreakable. Every sunrise was a reminder of the promise they had kept, and every sunset was a celebration of their reunion. Through the long days and quiet nights, they discovered the joy of simple companionship. They shared stories, laughter, and even the small, ordinary moments of life on the frontier. Jack showed Ayanna the trails he had traveled, the towns he had visited, and the people he had met. Ayanna shared her knowledge of the land, the plants, and the skills she had learned over the years. Together, they discovered that life was richer, more meaningful, and more beautiful when shared with someone who understood and respected your heart. And so, after years of waiting, longing, and uncertainty, Jack and Ayanna were finally together. Their reunion was more than just the fulfillment of a promise. It was the triumph of hope, the reward of patience, and the affirmation that true bonds could endure the trials of life. The cowboy and the Apache girl, who had once been strangers brought together by fate, now stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future held. The plains stretched wide and golden under the morning sun, carrying the soft rustle of the wind through tall grass. Jack Thompson and Ayanna walked side by side, the quiet harmony between them a reflection of the long journey that had brought them together again. The years of separation had tested their patience, resilience, and hope, but now they shared a bond stronger than either had imagined possible. Every glance they exchanged spoke of trust, respect, and a love that had survived the challenges of the world around them. After their reunion, Jack and Ayanna spent their days preparing for a life together. They discussed where they would settle, how they would build their home, and the ways they could honor both the traditions of Jack's cowboy life and Ayanna's Apache heritage. Their conversations were full of care, compromise, and mutual admiration. Jack wanted to show her the world he knew, the wide plains, the towns, and the quiet spots where he had always felt at peace. Ayanna, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land, the hidden streams, the safe trails, and the ways to live in harmony with nature. Together, they discovered that the world could be kind and generous when faced with love and respect. Though their reunion was joyous, life still held challenges. Some settlers were wary of their union, unable to understand the depth of their bond or the years of separation that had led to it. Jack and Ayanna faced skepticism and even whispers of disapproval. Yet these obstacles only strengthened their resolve. They had survived far greater hardships than judgment and misunderstanding. They had endured years apart, faced dangerous terrain, and navigated the unpredictable wilds of the plains. Nothing could now shake the connection that had been forged through courage, loyalty, and promise. Jack worked tirelessly to prepare a life that could support both of them. He built a small but sturdy cabin near a stream, surrounded by fields where they could grow food and raise livestock. Every nail he hammered, every beam he raised, carried with it the memory of Ayanna's return and the joy that had filled his heart since seeing her again. Ayanna contributed her own skills, teaching Jack how to make the most of the land, how to care for the animals, and how to live sustainably with the natural world around them. Their cooperation and shared vision became a daily celebration of teamwork and respect. As the seasons passed, their love grew deeper. Jack and Ayanna spent long evenings by the fire, sharing stories and dreams. They laughed together, remembering their first meeting in the wilderness, the promise Jack had made, and the long years they had spent apart. These stories were never told with bitterness or regret, but with gratitude for the experiences that had shaped them. Every tale, every memory, reminded them that the bond they shared was rare and precious. Jack often reflected on the years of waiting, the longing that had filled his heart, and the hope that had guided him. He realized that those difficult times had taught him patience, resilience, and the value of true connection. Life on the plains was hard, but the lessons it had taught him were invaluable. And now, with Ayanna by his side, he understood that every challenge had been worth it. The promise he had made under the setting sun so many years ago had led to this moment, the fulfillment of a vow that neither time nor distance could break. Ayanna, too, felt the depth of their journey. She had faced danger and uncertainty, had traveled across difficult terrain, and had risked her own safety to honor the promise she had carried in her heart. Standing with Jack, she felt a sense of peace and completion. She had returned not only for the man who had trusted her, but for the life they could now build together. Her heart was filled with gratitude, love, and a quiet joy that came from knowing that their future was theirs to shape. When they decided it was time to marry, the preparations were simple but full of meaning. They wanted a ceremony that honored both their cultures, the life they had lived, and the bond they shared. Members of Ayana's tribe gathered, bringing gifts of handmade crafts, food, and songs of celebration. Jack's friends from the plains came too, some curious, some skeptical, but all respectful of the love and commitment that was evident between the couple. The ceremony took place in a clearing surrounded by tall trees, with the gentle flow of a stream nearby and the golden light of the setting sun bathing the scene. Jack and Ayana exchanged vows that were heartfelt and personal. Jack spoke of the promise he had made so many years ago, the hope that had never left him, and the gratitude he felt for Ayana's bravery and presence in his life. Ayana spoke of the years she had spent preparing to return, the faith she had carried in her heart, and the joy she felt at being reunited with the man who had never forgotten her. Their words were simple but powerful, filled with emotion, sincerity, and the deep understanding of two souls who had found each other against all odds. After the ceremony, they celebrated with friends and family. Laughter and music filled the air as people shared food, danced, and rejoiced in the union of two people who had endured so much to be together. Jack and Ayana moved among their guests, their hands clasped tightly, their smiles reflecting the happiness they had longed for during the years of separation. The plains, once empty and harsh, now felt full of life and promise, a reflection of the love and connection that had triumphed over time and adversity. In the days that followed, Jack and Ayana settled into their new life. They tended their home, cared for the animals, and continued to explore the land together. Every day brought small joys, the quiet beauty of sunrise over the plains, the laughter of a shared meal, the satisfaction of work done together. Their love was not only in grand gestures, but in these ordinary moments, where patience, cooperation, and understanding created a deep sense of fulfillment. Neighbors and travelers who passed by often admired their life together. Jack and Ayana became known as a couple of courage, loyalty, and partnership. People spoke of the story of the cowboy and the Apache girl, amazed at the strength of the promise they had kept and the journey that had brought them back together. Their lives became a quiet inspiration, showing that true love could endure trials, distance, and the challenges of a world full of uncertainty. Even in the quiet moments, Jack and Ayana remembered the journey that had led them here. They spoke of the day they first met, of the dangers they had faced, and of the hope that had never left them. Those memories were never painful. Instead, they were cherished as reminders of the resilience of the human spirit, the power of promises, and the extraordinary bond they shared. The past had shaped them, but it no longer held them back. Together, they could face the future with confidence, hope, and joy. Jack often reflected on the lessons he had learned. He understood that courage was not only in facing danger, but in holding on to hope when life seemed uncertain. He realized that love was not always immediate or simple. It required patience, trust, and the willingness to endure the hardships that life presented. Most of all, he learned that promises, when made with sincerity, had the power to shape lives and create connections that could survive even the harshest trials. Ayana felt the same. She knew that strength was not just physical skill, but also the ability to remain faithful to one's heart and to the commitments one held dear. She understood that love was tested by distance and time, but when true, it could survive anything. Her return to Jack had been a journey not only across the plains, but also through hope, courage, and faith. The fulfillment of their promise was a testament to the power of perseverance and the depth of the bond they shared. As the years continued, Jack and Ayana's life together flourished. They raised animals, tended the land, and built a home filled with love and warmth. Every challenge they faced became a shared experience, every joy multiplied by the presence of the other. Their story, once defined by separation and longing, now became one of partnership, unity, and fulfillment. The plains, which had once been a place of loneliness and danger, became a home where love, hope, and courage thrived. In quiet moments by the fire, Jack would take Ayana's hand and look into her eyes, grateful for the journey that had brought them together. Ayana would smile, her heart full, remembering the young cowboy she had saved and the promise that had guided her across years of uncertainty. Together, they knew that their love was rare, precious, and enduring, a bond that could withstand the tests of time, distance, and life itself. Their story became a legacy of hope for those who heard it. Travelers, neighbors, and even distant friends spoke of the cowboy and the Apache girl, amazed at the bravery, patience, and love that had endured for so many years. Jack and Ayanna had shown that life, even when filled with hardship and uncertainty, could lead to moments of extraordinary fulfillment when guided by courage, sincerity, and the strength of promises kept. And so, as the sun set over the plains, casting long shadows and painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Jack and Ayanna stood together, hands clasped, hearts full, and eyes bright with hope. The journey that had begun with danger and uncertainty had led them to a life filled with love, joy, and shared purpose. The cowboy and the Apache girl had finally found their home, not only in the land around them, but in each other's hearts. Every sunrise was now a reminder of their promise fulfilled, every sunset a celebration of the life they had built together. The plains, once a place of trials and separation, had become a place of love, unity, and hope. Jack and Ayanna, bound by courage, trust, and an unwavering commitment to each other, faced the future with confidence, ready to continue their journey together, side by side for all the years to come.